Hey everybody, welcome to the second part. If you haven't seen the first video, go check that out. The second one is going to cover cleanup, origin points, creating the pivot points so our mech can actually move, and he hasn't got the ability to do all that just yet. We're going to finish up our fundamentals, and then we're going to texture this thing. And we're also going to have an introduction into a tool that is going to change everything for you. Control-Shift-X. That is going to be our carver tool. So I can literally just grab something and start cutting in booleans in like 2 seconds. They look really good where the bevels are already applied. Okay, so stick it out. Make sure to smash that subscribe, smash that like, and the value of learning the fundamentals first and then going over to do the more advanced mechs like this and have the lighting and all the setup and all that wonderful stuff. It's all coming, but you just got to go through some of the basics first. Now, if you're very advanced, you can skip this video if you wish and go on to the third one. And I know I promised the second video was going to have the beginning of that mech, but this one's going a little long because there's more stuff to learn. And so, like I said, this is more geared for beginners. But if you're not a beginner, you feel free to skip ahead. And let's get started. All right, so now let's get the concept of modifying this, because this was just a basic block out. And we don't have origin points, which I'll explain in the right positions. And then if you were to grab the torso and for some reason just move it ever so slightly, everything is going to go out of position. And it's going to go out of position because this is our mirror point. This is our kind of mirror pivot, if you will. So it's cube O2, which you can see this block is cube O2. We could just rename that to torso. And if you come back over here, you'll see it renamed it to torso here as well. And so the legs are also mirrored to the torso. And then this is just its own static object. Now, in order to get that to go in the right direction, say you're done modeling everything, and this is, of course, the quick broke down version, so you can kind of have an icebreaker for the bigger battle mech, for the real thing. What you could do is just come in here, and let's just apply these modifiers. I'll click on the leg, and I'll click down the drop down, and click apply. And so now, if I grab this, I only have this piece moving, which is mirrored. So I'll have to grab that as well. That's another one of our pivot points. All right, so now this will go. Okay, one more. Now this will go anywhere we want it to. And a neat little trick you can do is you can forward slash. What I want to do is I want to cut this piece off, and then I want to modify the arms a little bit. So the easiest way to do this is to jump into edit mode with this, go into face select, individually select these faces, or you can just jump into wireframe and then press B for box select and select all of those. Now in the quick menu, if you got it, it's separate by selection. You can also just hit P to pull up the separate menu and separate that by selection. And now you can press Z, go back into solid, and then select this object individually. Now what's happened is, and we can go inside the mesh. All right, so now that we have that selected, let's grab both of these and forward slash, and then individually grab this piece and hit the forward slash, which is on your number pad. Now you can press tab and go into edge select, and then you can see this is highlighted, so shift alt, double click it, and you'll select the entire loop. Now you can just hit F to fill that and jump back into object mode. Forward slash that, then bring this one back out, and you can now close this mesh the exact same way. Just double click, hit F to fill that. Now I don't want any of this geometry here, so what I can do is I can just select this one piece and hit Control plus, and it will progressively select everything around it. So if I hit Control plus again, it's going to continue to go up and up, or minus, and then I can select all that, hit F, and I will fill that face, jump back to object, and forward slash. And now all that's fixed up. It's the way we want it, because there's something we need to do. This really can't pivot the way it is, and so I need to hit H to hide this top part, and I'll grab this, and now our origin point is in the center, so want to go ahead and move the cursor to the origin point. And so Shift S, and I want the cursor to go to the selected. So now I have the 3D cursor directly in the middle, so now I can drop a mesh in. So Shift A will drop in a cylinder, and now I can bring that cylinder up with G and Z. Now there's a couple ways you could do this. You can eyeball it and tap G for grab and then Z for the Z axis and just get it close. And then you can scale it down, maybe just shade it smooth. Let's go into the vertex area under normals and shade it smooth so it looks good. Or you can turn on snap, pull down the drop down menu and go to face project. And we can also align rotation to target. Now with that, we should be able to just hit G and Z and constrain snap it directly down. And now it's absolutely perfectly on top of the mesh, it's perfectly centered, and it looks pretty good. Now another thing you can do if you want, I want the origin point to be at the bottom of this. So I'm going to, in object mode, make sure I'm an object, it'll say object up here. I can drop down options and select origin. Now origins is going to allow me to shift the origin point on this mesh. So if I hit G and X, and snap is still on, so I'm going to turn that off actually, just right click, drop that. So G and X, move this over, and then I turn origins off for just a moment, and I go to rotate this, it's going to rotate like that. And that can be very helpful for us later on when you're trying to get a very specific rotation on something. I'm going to turn origin. Alright, so now if you've gotten this out of bounds, technically you've got it anywhere outside or not where you want it, there's a couple of ways to do this. In the Shift S menu, I do have a set origin to geometry because of the mesh machine tools. And I would love to teach that here, but it's an entirely different tutorial. But what you can do is you can go to Object, Set Origin, and Origin to Geometry. You can also add that to Q Quick Favorites. So if I hit Q, then I can find Origin to Geometry, and it snaps it back perfectly. Now for this purpose, I'm actually going to leave the origin perfectly in the center. So if I hit Shift S and cursor to selected, it will jump directly in. I just want to scale this in a touch like that, perfectly fine. Then I'll press Alt H, or I can come up here to the hierarchy and find torso and bring it back. Sometimes you've got a lot of stuff in the background that you do not want to bring back all at the same time. So now with this piece here, I'm going to need to line it up, so G and Z for the torso. And you see it's not bringing this with it, so let's Shift select everything that's up here, and G and Z. And we'll bring that up just above it. And it can protrude inside the mesh a tiny bit. And it is always a good idea that if you have a lot of mesh inside, you can select that and delete that face. And you could potentially also Control R, bring in a loop cut to just above the mesh where you can see it, go into face select, and you could delete those faces. It's not really that important for this, but that is one way you can do a little cleanup. Now on another note, it's good to get in the practice of jumping into edit mode with things you've extruded. Hit A for all and Shift N. And what it's going to do is it's going to recalculate the normals. If you don't know what normals are, in the edit menu where it says edit, you can come up here to the overlays and drop that down. There's a whole bunch of stuff in here. If you come down to the bottom, you have the normals. So what we're going to do is display those normals. And under this, you can also bring the size up so you can see which direction that they're going. Now this is important for a bunch of reasons. One major one being texturing. You want this to be facing the correct direction so that the textures and lighting will work on it. And also for the fact of modifiers. So we want them to all operate the right way. So what you can do here, if you were to hit Alt N, you can bring up the normals menu, okay? And you could flip these normals And then if you went inside of this mesh, you'll see they're all flipped to the inside point, which is not what we want. So Shift N will flip them out, and you'll always know which direction they are facing. So I could just go through here and jump back into edit mode and see where all these are going. Hit A for all, Shift N, everything's good. And you could do a little check. If you do a lot of extrusions, then you're going to need to do that. And it looks like all of our normals are facing outward here as well. But if I A all, Shift N, recalculate, doesn't really do anything, but you can see the purpose. Now you also have the option under the overlays to look at the split normals as the edges, and you also have the vertices as lines. And so you can see which way they are going as well, which can be very useful for troubleshooting later on. If you're doing a bunch of extrusions on things, or you grab something, let's say you grab this face right here, you hit E to extrude, but you right click and then hit S to scale it because you want to put like a little hood on him and then extrude him down just a little bit. These normals may not look so good. So what we could do is come in here. I'll grab everything, go down and turn these on and see how it looks. And so I've got normals facing inside, which is actually okay. But if I hit Shift N, boom, it's now recalculated, and you can come down and recalculate it to inside or outside. We want them pretty much always calculated to the outside unless you're building a little house model, and then you want to recalculate inside. And if you've ever tried to build a little house model, you will see that it's not working out too good. Now for parenting, I want to grab this, Shift right click the torso, Control P, and I want to parent to the object and keep transform. And by doing that, if I go to move this and rotate it, well, now it's going to stay with. These will stay with it. And what I want to do is also, I actually want to use this piece, which we have, for the actual turning. So we can use that to turn with. And so if you look right here and hold this out, you'll see this parent line is coming out with it. Okay, and there's only one parent, but the origin, as you see that little orange dot, it's not in between these two. So that would actually be a good idea and a good opportunity to jump into face select. Let's turn off the normals, / to isolate. I'll press L over this to select all linked faces, and I can hit P, separate by selection. But I do prefer if you try to get it in the Q menu, just for your own benefit later on. Now if I jump back out, I can see my origin point is still over here, so I could come up to the object, set origin to geometry, and now this piece will rotate on its own, and this piece will rotate on its own because the origin point's already there. And this origin point is just underneath here, so I want to bring it back as well. So I'm going to set that origin to geometry, and so now it will turn a little bit better in respect to how I want to make it work. So now grab all this stuff here, hit Alt P, and I want to clear the parent. Okay, and now there are no lines here. So now I could grab all three of these and then Shift right click. My last object is going to be my little pivot cylinder here, Control P, parent object, keep transform, and now it can rotate freely. But it's going to move all over the place, and we don't want that. So I just want this to rotate on the Z axis, and if you see right here, it's going to rotate on the Z. And so I want to lock all the other rotations that this potentially could have. So if I just hit R, it's just going to rotate. And I also don't want this to move. So the location, I want to lock all the locations for this. So this is just going to be a rotation. Also, I don't want to knock this out of scale, because if you don't apply the scale later on, that's going to mess up texture. So if I try to scale now, not working, try to G, grab, not moving, doesn't work. If I grab this one, try to move it, nothing's going. But if I try to rotate it, which is its primary function, then we're good. And so that's all I wanted for there. All right, so now we could take this piece, which we haven't constrained in any way, and I want to Shift D, right click to let it go. It's still there. Shift right click the cylinder, Control minus. And if that didn't work and you did not get a boolean, then you need to come to Edit, Preferences, Add-ons, and up here under this little box, type in BOOL and click on Bool Tool. This is your Boolean operation fast operation tool, and save it if you have to. All right, so now you actually have a cutter, and if I move this cutter around, you can see it's going to cut wherever I move it. So I'm going to right click, drop it. I'm going to go to the cylinder and go to the tools down here for the modifiers. I've got my bevel, and then I've got a bool tool. The booleans cannot be at the bottom of the modifier stack. They have to come up to the top. And so now I've moved that up. So now what that does is it kind of clears up the shading a little bit, but what we want to do is we want to fix the boolean. Maybe 0.002 would clean it up a little bit. Let's / and look at that. And that's actually not too bad, but there are a little bit of shading errors in here. So what you can do is you can come to this and add a weighted normal, and it's going to clean up probably most of that. And then the boolean can be applied, and the bevel and all that can be collapsed out. And so we don't get into too much mesh cleanup right now, but later on when these things are kind of producing these big errors like that, and you wanted just a little bit more of a bevel, what you can do is you can come in here to the edges, and we'll go over into edge select and just take a look at it. It looks like if we get a little closer that these lines are too close together, so Shift Alt double right click, double tap G, and you can slide that back. Now let's come back out, and I got a little bit more of a bevel now, and there is a little problem in that corner, but if you come over here, this is just some very light cleanup. This is not everything you're going to need to know. If I select that outer edge, double tap G and kind of bring it back, and it will support that a lot more. And that looks pretty good. Not too bad for the beginner stuff. Now, one important thing to note is that every single time you symmetrize, you get a line in the middle, whether it's going on the x-axis, y-axis, whatever is going around respectively. So Shift Alt, select that line, because you don't want to create a whole bunch of these. Hit X, and instead of delete, we want to dissolve that edge. And it doesn't hurt the mesh at all to do that. As you can see, there's absolutely no shading errors. All right, so let's make a adjustment to this mech. I just want to delete the entire head piece, and I want to come over here and edge select that, hit F to fill that face, maybe add a couple loop cuts right there just so that's nice, looks good. Now this is still parented, so it's still going to be in the right spot, and I want to bring the cursor here, so Shift S, cursor to selected. And I want to Shift A, drop in a UV sphere. I'm going to rotate that bad boy on X. Press in 90 on the number pad, hit enter. And let's scale it up. Take up the front view, G and Z. And we'll bring it just to where it's slightly inside of that. Now I want to shade this smooth right off. And I want to come over vertex area, and I want to auto smooth that. Now it doesn't look too good just yet, but what we're going to do is go into face select with this. You can press B for box if you have to. Select that, take up that front view. Let's zoom in just a touch. Hit the Control plus. That's good enough right there. Hit F to fill that, and it's going to flatten everything out. And so let's take up the side view. G and Y should move that out. I don't like how that's going to stretch. It's going to give us a little shading error. So let's turn on proportional editing. And now let's hit G and Y and kind of roll the middle mouse wheel out just a little bit. And so trying to sharpen that up a little right about there, just so that face is kind of extruding past. All right, so we're going to keep this exceptionally simple, just like I said. So we're going to pick a couple faces that are in line right here. I just want to grab two faces here. And see right about here, grab those, take up the front view, Q, extrude faces along nominals, hold down shift, and then you can bring these out. Okay, so bring them in to about there, so that way it's kind of inside the mesh, and that is perfectly fine. Looks a little bit more robotic now. So let's add some more stuff here, shall we? Let's go tab, edge, and let's go in and shift alt, shift alt, shift alt, shift alt, and that's pretty good. Control B adds a little tiny bevel. And let's extrude faces along nominals, hold down shift, bring it in. Doesn't have to be too far, just a little bit, and that looks pretty cool. And so we don't have a bevel or anything on here, so let's shift right click, control C, and copy the modifiers. And now we've got a bevel on there, and it looks a lot cooler. And if you wanted to get crazy with it, you could add a subsurf to this to make it look really, really smooth and really nice. And so you could safely bring that up to 2 on the levels if you wanted to. And then you could also do the same here. Even though we're not going to be subsurfing the big mech, that's perfectly okay to do this as long as you don't do too much of it. And it just cleans up the mesh a lot more. It makes it look a lot more appealing. But if you do that there, you're going to have to kind of follow suit. So just keep that in mind. Now, I really don't like how this base looks. It's extremely basic. So what we want to do is let's get into the carver tool. All right, the carver tool is built into Blender. So all you should have to do is Control Shift X to get into it. But if not, go to Edit, Preferences, go to Add-ons, type in Carver, and you'll have the carver tool pop up. And there's a little list down here with a drop down that'll give you all of the hotkeys that you're going to need. And I'll go ahead and pull this out just a touch so you guys can see it. So there's a lot of things in here you can do. You can create objects, automatically bevel them, do difference, booleans, slice booleans. You can do a union technically. There's a lot of actual custom brushes, which is really cool. You can randomize things. You can either apply or not apply the operation and then have a live boolean. You can scale it inside. You can gap the rows and columns of brushes, and I will explain all that as we go. So real cool, just grab this. And I may extend these arms out, but you know, like I said, it's just a kind of a beginner thing here. So try not to go too far. It's Control Shift X. Okay, real easy. Rectangle, bring it down, left click, left click. Now you've got a boolean. If you want to symmetrize that bad boy, then you just go into face select, whatever, hit all, and click symmetrize. And remember, you've got that line in the middle, so immediately you can go to edge select, shift alt, and select just that edge, which it should. Hit X, don't delete, but dissolve that edge, and something else got grabbed. Yeah, I had a face in there somehow. I'm not liking that. Yeah, somehow I had selected a face previously, so X and dissolve, and everything's great. Now, if you notice, we have edge bevel weight automatically applied to the entire mesh, including our own bevel. All right, so let's go ahead with the orthographic view of 1 and hit Control Shift X. And now I want to hit the space bar until I get to circle, left click one time, and now I've got the circle. I can hit W, bring it all the way back, hit X a couple of times, then Alt will move it around. I kind of like it right about there. Hold down Shift, left click, and now you've got a neat little slice operation, and that's 2 separate pieces. And that can be used to make some really cool objects that look like clips. Now, I really would want a clip right there, but what I can do is I can actually add that to the circle piece. So let's go ahead and add a clip or 2. And I can just use the rectangle for this, and I could slice it somewhere about here. This looks pretty good. And I'm trying to avoid the bevel too. So Shift, left click, and now I've got that slice, and that is really nice. I like how that came out. And, you know, it just adds that little extra to the mesh to make it look a little bit more realistic. And I could symmetrize, but I'm just going to go ahead and add another one right here, just freehand. It's not that important. And that looks pretty cool. And now you can go around the mesh and start adding things like this. So if I press 3, and what we can do is shift middle mouse, I'll bring this portion up. Actually, let's see, where would it look best? So that clip would actually look best right about here. So what I'll do is Shift Alt X, and I want to start my triangle, or my square rather, my rectangle piece, like right about here. That looks pretty good, just a little bit above where a bevel would be. Hold down Shift, left click, and let's see. Probably, yeah, create a little bit of a shading issue. Got a little bit of an artifact here. So let's zoom in and see what we can do with this. Control middle mouse and zoom in. And I'm just going to grab this piece and start here, and I'll hit Tab, Vertex Mode. And it looks like I've got some vertex that are just a little too close. So double tap G, kind of slide that over a touch. That looks good. And let's see what we got going over here. Let's zoom in just a little bit. And it looks like I've got a little cross piece down here in the bottom right. So I'm going to grab this vertex, double tap G, and slide that one back a little bit. Let's look at it now. Okay, so this piece looks good. So I'm going to grab this one, jump into vertex, select, see what we got. Anytime you get it too close to a bevel, just double tap G and kind of bring that back a little bit. That looks very nice. And I got the similar situation going on down here. If I double tap G and probably go up, should clean that up. Now that's good. So you can do whatever you want if you know how to clean it up. Now for the other side, that is one piece. So guess what? / let's try not to make you dizzy here. I'll hit over into edit mode, select all Q, and I will symmetrize that. And it looks like we did good, so let's bring our line with Shift Alt and dissolve that edge out of there so everything looks good now. And let's take a little look at our mesh. Inside looks good, and the outside looks good. So / back, and that's fine. So now I can do the same with this one. Jump into the edit, select Q, and symmetrize. And I believe that that operation should still be on the right side, so it looks good. And we got our symmetry line here, so let's go ahead, select that, X, and dissolve that. And we should be able to just go Tab, Object, / and go back. And now we've created a bevel the way we want it to. We don't let the mesh tell us how it's going to be. So you tell the mesh how it's going to be, and you make things look, make things look like the way you want. Now, one problem I do see is I somehow moved this. Not sure how I did that, but hey, it happens. So I just move it back into place. And apparently, let's see, I'm going to have to put the origin back to the geometry and scale that on the Z just a touch. G and C, bring it down. Let's see if it looks crazy. Yeah, it looks a little crazy. G and Y. Hold down Shift, and I can kind of move that into place. And I'm probably going to scale that. So that was really, really weird. Don't know how that happened, but it's one of those things you can kind of look out for. And like I said, everything is extremely repairable. Everything's repairable. Now, I don't know if I've been saying it enough, but make sure to create a save point and save this as something. So this can be the practice blend. Save it in a special folder. Create save points. Hit Control S, and you'll see down here, as soon as I do that, it brings up either the save menu or it automatically saves it. I've got machine tools on, so it brings up a bunch of other stuff. All right, so that looks pretty good. You've now added some more serious details. You could go through and add more details as you wish. We'll go through the carver tool in greater detail, but like I said, this is just basics to familiarize you and get you used to some of the workflows. Now what we can do is start texturing. All right, guys, so we're going to texture this, but the first thing we're going to do is put it in the lighting that we're going to want it to be in. Now, you've got a number of options here, okay? And the first one is going to be you're going to put in, let's go cursor to origin, Shift A, drop in a plane. The first option is you could use standard world lighting and kind of adjust things. Let's go to the EV engine so you can see that. And then go turn on scene lights and scene world. And you can adjust that scene world lighting if you wish, but it's really washed out. It's not designed to do what we need it to do, and you really can't see anything. Now, if I come over and turn off scene world, you should have at least 4 or 5 HDRIs in here. You can use those, and those work out very, very well and are going to give you perfect studio lighting. Okay, so one thing to note is that an HDRI is going to be very easy, especially for a beginner. Polyhaven.com. I could have typed that in the top. If you go to Polyhaven, this is a bunch of free assets. You can browse HDRIs, and if you like something like sunrises and sunsets, there's a bunch of options. Some things are pay, some are not even ready. So you scroll down and find something that you like. What's going to make our mech look really, really ominous and dangerous? It's going to be low lighting. So let's find something like cloudy. Partly cloudy. Partly cloudy should make our mech look really scary and beautiful at the same time. I like this one. Table Mountain. So I'm going to grab this one. 4K is fine. You have a HDR, download HDR. Don't download the EXR. It's kind of pointless. Now, I'm not going to open this file yet. I'm going to go back over to Blender. And I want to grab the viewport lighting. And right here, without scene world selected, you'll have your HDRs. Just come over here and show the light preferences. Click Install. Go to your downloads, or whatever you've got, and you'll find the HDR inside of here. Let's come over to Viewport Shading. I don't want Scene World on. I'll click the cogwheel. I'll come over, make sure that you click Install, because you got a bunch of installs here. Click Install for the HDRIs. It was called Table Mountain. Okay, now I've got it. Double click it. It's going to install, and that's kind of what the icon looks like, so you could remember what that looks like. You can just X that out, come back over here, click your drop down menu, and here we go. So I've got my table Pure Sky, and then of course we do have our exposure kind of down a little bit to make it look a little bit more ominous. And so now you can see how that's going to look, and that lighting's actually pretty nice. And bring the exposure down. And what that's going to do is it's going to really start opening up all the little crevices, and all the details we put on it are going to start showing up really, really nicely. Now I'm going to take this plane and I'm going to jump into Edge Select. I'm going to grab an edge, hit E to extrude it, press Z to get that on the Z plane. And now I want to hit Control B. Whoops, excuse me. Hit A for all, Control B, and let's bevel that bad boy. You can roll the middle mouse wheel up until you get something like 18, 19, 20, doesn't matter. Get a whole bunch of loop cuts. This is just an infinite background. It does not matter. The more cuts you add, the better it looks. And then Q, shade it smooth. Then you can drop in a camera if you don't already have one in the scene. A lot of people delete them. So just left click anywhere and Shift A, drop in a camera. And then you pick a spot that you like. Like I like this look here, so I'm going to grab this and RZ, kind of rotate it and bring it in right here, and then Control Alt 0. I'll right click to grab the camera, come to the camera properties. Don't mess with the focal length too much because we can do a lot more. 40's fine. You could bring this one to 48, zoom out a little bit, and with this selected you can hit G, you can grab the camera and move it. Now, once you've done that, you can press Z to go up and down. You can press Z to go back. Now you can hit RX twice and kind of move it around. Make sure you offset your mech. You don't want it centered. This photography rules. And then R and Y. I can reselect that, R and Y. we'll move it in different ways. There we go. That's better. You can hold down Shift if it's wobbling and getting crazy on you. And I really like that right there. So I could go back to render properties and I could bring the contrast up or down a little more. And one of those things we're going to want to do is very basic, but I'm going to drop in a point light here, G and Y, and bring it back so it's directly behind him, G and Z. You kind of bring it up and then recheck my camera angle. I want it to hide behind him. So I'm going to grab the light and add some backlighting behind him. Make sure I've got scene lights enabled, and I can start cranking that bad boy up, probably 3,000. Now we're going to need more than that. We're going to need about 15,000. And that's some nice backlighting. And I can bring that radius back. We're up and cover some more areas, but I like bringing the radius to 0. And let's see. Yeah, if I grab that, I can kind of bring it up and have some light hitting some different areas and create some extra shadows that the HDR is not grabbing. And then I can also Shift A and drop a little point light here. GX, maybe move it there. G and Y, something like that. And then just crank that one up a little bit so I've got a little bit of light hitting the front of this thing. And then I can change the color of that light too, make it nice and soft so it looks good. And so now we can see in a very basic studio setup here, in essence, what our mech is going to look like with textures on it. So I want to bring, let's see, we're at 3.6 for the exposure. You could remember that if you want. I'm going to bring that up a little bit. All right, for texturing, we'll keep it very simple. I actually made a little procedural texture specifically for this mech. And so if I come over to the asset browser, I've got mech metal here. And I could just dump that metal right on there. And it's a really nice kind of grainy, low light metal where you could pull up the shader editor and then grab that. You kind of see what it took to do it. I used a Principled BSDF, an overlay, a noise texture, some bump maps. I've got a gradient in here because I wanted the option to make an active camouflage material for it as well. And once it loads up, yeah, so it's got a neat little camouflage there, and you can, you could change the camouflage and do a lot of cool stuff with it. So I'll show you guys how to make that material so you can put that on your mech. So I'll just come over and eliminate that material, click new. So I'm in the shader editor. Majority of the work's going to be done here with the nodes. If you haven't worked with the nodes before, it's a great opportunity. It's just a Principled BSDF. It's the one shader that tries to do everything. You've got a lot of other shaders. So if you were to click here, you can see these are all shaders. You have an add shader, anisotropic, background, diffuse, emission, glass, and so on. So what we want to do is bring it in a color ramp, and you could do this at any stage you want. So I'll just type in ramp, if I can spell it correctly, and make sure I'm in the EV engine. This all nice and visible. And from here, you can start changing the colors, right? The color ramp will allow you to do that. And I can also pull out the gradient, which is optional. Hit enter and attach the gradient texture to this. So now half of this can be one color and the other half can be the other color. Or you can switch it and do a bunch of different things with it, whatever you want to do. So let's map this out. So I want to pull the gradient vector out and type in MAPP. Get in a mapping node. If you haven't experienced any of this, the vector is going to control different points in space, in 3D space, whether it be edges, vertex, and faces, and where things appear. And so from here on this vector, I'll pull this out and type in COOR, and we'll get a texture coordinate. And this node is pretty special because it does a lot of things. I've actually got a full tutorial on it, but we're just going to take object into vector, And what that's going to do is allow us to map a procedural texture that moves across the surface of the mesh. All right, so now we can go from linear to easing, which is going to smooth this out quite a bit. And if you want a rougher, don't do this. You want like a harder edges, and then ease over here. And that's going to make a very, very smooth transition back and forth if you leave it this way. Now, real simple, we want to add something else to this, and we can actually take the black color and we can bring that up to a gray. And let's go to the principal BSDF, pull our metallic all the way to the top end of the scale, and then bring the roughness back just a little bit. We don't want it too shiny, but we definitely don't want it dull. This is going to be metallic. Now down here on the normals for the principal, grab the normal and pull that out. And we're going to type in BUMP for bump or bump map. And the bump map goes into the normals go into the normal, and the displacement goes into the normal. And that's another tutorial in and of itself. Now what we want to do is we want to control this bump map. You want to see nothing has happened yet because we haven't inputted anything. None of the controls are really going to do anything, period. So what you want to do is you want to input something into this node because nodes work from right to left. So this principal BSDF is asking the bump map what it wants to put into the normals, so it can output it to the texture. So what we want to do is grab the height, pull it out, left click, drop, type in noise, and just hit enter because you want to plug the factor into the height. And what's going to happen is you're going to get a little bit of extra texture. And a bump map is trying to give you something like height information. And so we want to bring the scale up to something kind of high. So put it to about 150 and hit enter. And now that's really, really grainy and might work for some things, but it's not going to work for us. So you can bring the distortion level nice and high. And that's very close to the metal that I already had. Now, if you want the bump to kind of show up on the inside instead of being bumpy on the outside, kind of be like divots, you can click invert, and that will drop it inside. And then you can bring the detail up touch. The distortion is just fine where it's at. And now you've got a nice metal. You could really just go with that if you wanted to, but I'm going to take this a step further, and I'm going to pull out the location and type in noise again, and I want the noise factor, so I can just hit enter. And then once that loads, we will start to have a little variance in the texture. So if you move the scale around, you can start to see a little bit of variation. And now we're still split in the middle. So we've got one texture on one side and one on the other. So we want to kind of shift that around. So I'm going to bring the mapping node up. This is what the mapping node is good for in this instance. I could take the Y axis and I could type in, say, 90 degrees. And now that shifts everything to the back since the Y-axis is going that way. And then I can bring the Z and bring that little camouflage pattern forward. Now it's just black and white because we haven't changed any of the colors, but if you wanted to, you could come in and change some of those and have a pretty neat effect. You can also grab the gradient texture by right-clicking on just it, or left-click, and then hit M to mute it. And what's going to happen there is that's going to disappear that camouflage. And so you can press M to bring it back, and it's kind of optional. You can do this however you want. Now what I can do is I can grab a mix RGB, which is Shift A, mix RGB, and then just as you see the little white line appears, this node can now be dropped in here and automatically connected. Now this mix node is a factor. It's taking the input from here and a blank input because we don't have anything there just yet. So if I bring this factor back to 0, we just have the one texture that we have. And then if I bring it all the way over here, then it's not going to show the colors of that texture, okay? So 0.5, it can stay like that, and you have a lot of options. You could type in MUSG, spacebar search, and type in MUSG, Musgrave texture, and we can drop that in here. And I did not want to drop it in for the noise, so let me just Shift D that and bring it up, and then I can hit Control X and get rid of that, and then Alt right click. Didn't want to go to height. But anyways, now let's kind of clean this up a little bit. Bring my Musgrave texture here, and I can plug the height into either the factor and get one result, which is going to kind of give us a slight shadow in the background, a little bit, not much. Or I can bring that into the color, the second color. And the mix node is good for mixing vectors, and so that's what makes it so powerful for this application, is that I can just change it around, add a little extra detail perhaps, and a bunch of other things. Then I can switch this mix node to overlay, which will have a little bit of a different function now. And it's going to layer these instead. And so now it's kind of moving and overlaying the other noise texture. So you have this neat little outline pattern going on. So we could add conceptually another color. I'll grab that color and make it blue so you can see where it's at. And now you get this pretty cool color. And like I said, you can come over to the gradient texture and just mute that. And then you can take the Musgrave, hit M on that one and mute it, and have the option, let's just grab the overlay and mute that. You have the option to have just the one color, and I'll remove that one so we kind of come back. I'll just remove that one ticker, and now you've got this one color that you can put on the mech. Or you can change it just a little bit. Alright, so now you want to move this texture to everything else. How are you going to do that? One way you can do that is to hide the plane, hit A for all, shift right click the actual object that has the texture, and then what you want to do is hit Control L. And that's going to bring my link transfer data menu up, and I can do a bunch of different things from here, but I just want to link these materials. And now the entire mesh is going to be that metallic material. So we don't want the whole entire mech to be that color. So let's grab these, which are joined. If you didn't join these two, so they don't move as one, hit Control J with them both selected. And I'm going to go over into face select mode. And I just want, you can do this in object mode if it's easier. Shift Alt. I'm going to click and grab the insides of the barrels. Control plus will select all that for us nice and easy. And I just want to select the actual barrel, so I don't want to select anything else. And then I'll come over to the material tab. I want to click plus, new, and now I've got new material. So let's go back and look at it. This can be a little darker gray. You can go back into object mode. Actually, didn't assign it. Click assign. Now you can go back into object mode, grab the metallic, possibly pull it all the way up, bring the roughness back just a touch. It looks a little bit more like gun barrels. And then what you can do is you can come here and just select this face. And I know I'm moving a little bit faster now, but it's kind of the progression. It's how it goes. That way people can kind of learn to have a little bit more of a speedy workflow as you go. And so I want to add another material. I hit the plus symbol here, hit new, and I'll click assign. And now for this material, I could make it an emission, which would be very helpful. Make that an emission, turn it to whatever color you want, and then you can turn the emission up on it. And now you'll have a little bit of lighting. So now you could run through the entire mech and start coloring things the way you want them. So I'm going to do that for some of these other parts, and I will pause the video or it will just be crazy long. And as I'm texturing this thing, I did kind of notice that I did not turn the strength down on the bump, so I want to turn the strength down just a touch and give it just a little bit closer to that nice metallic texture that I had previously. All right, starting to look pretty good. So Alt H, kind of bring this back. And I did kind of inset this a little bit, bring it back, and then I reworked the texture there. So that could be one thing you could do as well. Now I will hit 0 for the camera here. And what we can do is do a little test render. And I want to kind of mess with the contrast, bring it up a little bit. And one of those things is setting up your render. Okay, so the viewport samples don't necessarily matter, but the render does. If you have a slower PC, you could easily get away with 10 samples if you want. And you can press F12, or you can come up here and render the image and get a general idea of how it's going to end up looking. So that's pretty cool. Texture doesn't look too bad. You could do a lot more samples. What we could do is set up our volume now. So go to the world properties, drop down volume, click none, and then come down, and we want volume scatter. So once you add that, we can go over to cycles and see how this is going to look. And you're going to have to potentially turn on your scene world. And you won't see anything because it's absorbing all of the lights. So you want to turn the density down to something like 0.1 just to kind of start and get that neat little background look like I had. Now these lights will have to be adjusted so you can get those rays from behind the mech. I want to turn my exposure up a little bit more and get that effect of this thing kind of just coming out of the abyss or something behind you. And we want to add some extra lights and things, but just kind of get you to the point where you can see the lighting and how it's going to be. I'm going to go back over to the world properties and put this to 0.05 and drop that volume. And then I'm going to match the exposure with that until I get what I want. Now some of these lights are not helping, some are. Better seen, actually. Let's go over to Eevee, as we can see some of this volume here as well. I'll go from cycles to Eevee so I can turn on ambient occlusion and bloom. Bloom is how you're going to make this look really nice. Now this is where you can take advantage of one of Blender's features that's relatively new in the last year. What you do is just grab any part of the mech. Like, I'll grab the torso, doesn't really matter. Shift A, go to light, and you've got a 3-point light. It's kind of a very, very, very basic studio lighting setup where it's going to give you 3 lights pointed and parented, if you will. So as you move these lights around, and you may not notice it right off, but the lights are all upside down. So I'm going to bring this in and up. And I want to kind of get some light coming down on the mech this way. And then I'll press 3. And I'll grab this one of that orthographic style. And I can bring this light up. And then I'll bring this light up right about here. And now this one, I want all my light, the majority of it coming from back here. So I'll have this one coming a little bit lower. And this one I'll turn into a spot. Let's go back over here and see about the intensity. You just kind of ramp it up, Not really doing much, so let's put it to 5,000. All right, so I'll bring it up a little bit more. How about 25,000? There you go. Start to see that volume absorption, man, it just draws all the light in. So I'll bring the spot size down just a little bit. I want to kind of follow the blue theme that I've got going here. So what I can do is I can bring the color up to like a light blue. And I can bring this up to 45,000 or so. It doesn't really matter. And have a really serious light coming in from back there. Let's grab the camera view because that's how it's going to end up. So you're going to bring this. I just tap this with G. It's already selected, but hit G. And because this light is already attached. I don't have to do too much. Now that's kind of bright. I think I'll delete that one. Yep, that's what I wanted. So now I want to like shoving in from the back here. Maybe bring it up just a little bit so it's inside this cone. And I'll bring this one up to about 12,000. Okay, that's still a point light, so let me turn that into a spot. And I'll bring that back just a little bit. So I'm trying to light this area up without like washing it out too much. And I want to accentuate some of the shadows. There we go. So now you can see some of the areas are lit that we've detailed. And so that's going to show up real nice. All right, so that's all I'm going to do right there. What we could do, though, to kind of make this a little bit better, and it looks like I could bring that down a little bit, perhaps. Scale that on the X and then GX. There we go. Mine got messed up a little bit, so I'll fix that, and I want to create another save point. So that's definitely a milestone, and I do not want to lose all that work. So now I want to add something else here. I'll grab this outer edge, and I'll grab this outer edge, and I want to go over to the material tab, and I can remove, let's see, let's just create a new, and I'll assign it, and I want to make this an emission, so I'll click the Principled BSDF, grab emission, come back over and check that out. Now it should be assigned. If I was to bring this up, you can see the glow from that. So we'll add a little bit more life to the mech itself. And so you've got that. You could do that to each one of these as well. So I could bring this up. Should still be mirrored, maybe? I don't think it's mirrored. Okay, so I'll grab both of these and inset them. Come over to object mode, select just the outer faces, and I will create a new material, assign it, change it to an emission, and turn it up a little bit. And now go back to object mode, / back out, and go back into the EV engine. And now I've got this neat little pattern going on where you can start to see some of the detail of the mech, and it really makes it come to life. So we could do the inside track as well, and then I'm going to do the outside ring here. I was going to do a lot of this off camera, but there's really no reason to do that, especially since hopefully there's a good bit of beginners that have decided to jump on this. All right, I'm just going to have to get a little closer. There we go, and that line there, we'll grab that one. Now I've got that material still on that mesh. I can assign that, jump back out, and you can see that looks pretty good. / Now I'm going to rinse it and repeat that process. And I'll just grab all these faces at once with shift right click, I to inset, bring it down. Now I would love to be able to actually just select all of these outer edges. So I'm going to come up to select and similar by area. And what that's going to do is it's going to select all those edges for me, because you know what? You get kind of tired of just selecting all those. Now I click a new material, new, assign, Principled BSDF, emission. Go ahead and turn it up 30 or 40, doesn't matter. You can measure the light intensity, kind of go back and forth and see if you like it, but that's starting to look pretty good. Now I want to do the outer rings here, so I'll go ahead and pull these, and I'm going to go into face select here and face select here, and I'll plus to add a material to the canister, click a new Principled BSDF, go to emission, and turn that up. And then just make sure whatever you choose color-wise that it's going to make sense. And I didn't click assign, so there we go. So now it's starting to look pretty cool. So now if you were to actually go in and render this out, then you've actually got something starting to look like a mech, right? Maybe you shouldn't have all those lights on there if you're trying to hide, but this will get you started in understanding, and I'm going to end the tutorial right here for now, and I will pick up with a third tutorial where we will pose the mech and we can add a little camera animation to it and render it out and put a camera shake in here to make it look a little bit more realistic. And we'll have the camera kind of sizing everything up, and we might just go through with the carver tool and kind of clean up the legs and the feet a little bit. I didn't actually plan on doing this much work to it, but it's kind of turning out nice, so just got to go with it. Thanks for watching, guys. Smash the subscribe, smash that like, and I will see you guys in the next tutorial lesson.